Don't you just love it when you work hard on your game for months and then scrap everything you've done and start over? Hi, I'm Mitko, and previously I reviewed our studio's new project, a momentum-based game with the working title Storm Dart. We made a prototype which we kinda liked.
Super Exo 1, Sonic the Floppy Hedgehog.
Then we threw it in the bin and started from scratch. Let's see how things are going 1 month later, now that we know exactly what kind of game we're making. First, to address the elephant in the room. Last time I told you it was going to be a game about a girl riding a hoverboard, but all you actually saw was just a capsule moving around. So, before anything else, obviously, we need to put the capsule on a hoverboard. But how do we do that? Although it might have not looked like it, the player was not just a capsule. It had an invisible sphere at the bottom which acted as suspension. This helped the player move smoothly over rough terrain and achieve that satisfying feel of sliding down without twitching or jittering caused by small bumps. In theory, we should be able to duplicate that sphere and offset it to fit the bounds of that stretched cube, hoverboard. It kinda works, but it looks quite unnatural, and that's because the player's rotation is controlled strictly through code. When you move in a certain direction, the code says you gotta be looking at exactly where you're going. This doesn't play well with the physics, obviously. So the first task was to make the code rotate the player using physics forces. For that, I found a good article on PID controllers. That stands for Proportional Integral Derivative. I found an awesome code example for calculating torque on a website called Digital Opus, so I stole it, adapted it, and with some tweaking, things started to look and feel pretty nice. The next task was to implement a mechanic for jumping on enemies. Once again, I used the PID controller for the velocity, so that whenever the player is somewhat on top of something they can jump on, they get slightly aided by the game. There are currently no enemies in the new project, so instead you get big orange bows. Right about that time we found a bug which we absolutely had to turn into a feature. If you steer into any direction just before jumping and then let go of the movement input while in the air, you can perform spins and flips and it feels awesome. It requires a bit of skill to pull off and will make it so the longer you spin, the more energy gets charged. And if you land nicely after spinning, you will get a slight speed boost. This is not implemented at this point, but that's the plan for now. Now I can play around all day with colorless primitives, but we are in a bad need of some actual good-looking art. Enter Sergo, our lead artist who is here to rescue the project from the abyss of dullness. He and Nadia, who apparently doesn't want to be on camera, have entered the art production stage. To save time and still produce a lot of content, Sergo proposed that we use assets from the store whenever we can and modify them to fit our art style. Obviously, there is a lot of custom stuff that we will be making, but generic objects like trees and rocks could be based off existing assets and nobody will ever know. Except maybe everyone who just watched this video. Anyways, here are some work in progress environment shots. We are using the universal render pipeline in Unity, and we're utilizing the shader graph to achieve a more unique look. Also, a couple of assets like Cozy Weather, Map Magic and Microsplat. After we nail the nature stuff, we'll move on to designing buildings, ruins and other custom structures that the game story relies on. More on that in the next video. By the way, if you're digging this so far, consider subscribing to our channel because there's more to come. Next, we have some progress on the main character. We're slowly moving her out of the 2D plane of existence and into gorgeous, glamorous 3D with Blender. Our low poly version of the character was about 20,000 triangles and we're using a high poly mesh to bake details onto it. Right now the textures are just solid color and they will remain like that for a while until we get most key assets in the game. But what do you think? Yay or nay? We haven't finalized her yet, so now is the time for constructive criticism.
Destroy us!
Emotional damage!
Something else we have been bringing into 3D are the enemies. We started with the most basic and common ones so that the development department has something more generic to work with. The models are still lacking a rig and therefore are also lacking animation. This is all going to come at a later stage. Hopefully next time you can see some more progress. Now, in terms of level generation, last time I showed you a system that allows us to combine terrains in Unity. We have advanced this system to be a lot faster and to support all terrain features like grass and trees. We already produced a couple of example levels manually using the method of combining pre-designed terrains and it's pretty sweet. Now what's left is to implement the level layout generation system. After a couple of design sessions with Danny, we finally found a possible approach to that. He's following the philosophy of the zone of influence, which is a design approach used in open world designs, and in layman's terms it means that you see a point of interest in the distance, you start moving towards it, and as you're moving, your view of that point gets obscured and another point of interest reveals. If you're persistent, you can keep moving towards the first point of interest, and if you have ADHD you might wander off. To achieve this, we need to generate a map with points of interest and visual blocks in between some of them and somehow ensure that every generated level is interesting and playable. Our approach is to first define a nice big circle and choose a random point along its circumference, then apply some offset towards the center, and this is where we place the starting spot for the player. Then we generate a bunch of random points of interest, and we use Delaunay triangulation to compute the positions of the visual blocks. After we place the visual blocks, we generate a bunch more small points of interest, and that's kind of it. Well, the process has a lot more steps than that, but I don't want to be too specific, at least not in this video. So this algorithm works pretty well in theory when we try to execute it by hand, but what's gonna happen when we finish the code for generation is anyone's guess. Now it's time for more concepts, story, and core loop review. You might already know that the game is a roguelite set in a post-apocalyptic world where the player is racing a storm towards a certain destination. What you didn't know is that the storm is actually nanobots driven by a sophisticated AI which allegedly caused the apocalypse. Your goal as a player is to shut down the AI using a big machine that needs to travel to the far end of the planet. You travel from node to node with this machine, we call it the main base, and at each node you ride the hoverboard exploring the surroundings and gathering resources. You need fuel to travel, so you're looking for these green crystals. Once you find one, you can call an extraction drone which brings it back to the main base. However, along the way you might also find people who you can recruit as crew for the main base. They give you certain perks and abilities and also aid you during the endgame, which we haven't figured out yet. However, having crew requires provisions, so in addition to fuel, you need to be on the lookout for edible plants that the drone can extract. Other things you can find in the nodes: workbenches, gives the player abilities; chests, pretty common, they contain upgrades for the player; story bits that you collect to uncover the story; and this questionable looking thing, which is basically like the pipe bomb from Left 4 Dead. I'm expecting most of these to be brought to life by the time we make the next video, but let's see how it goes. So, what's the plan from here? We're gonna scrap the entire project and nah, I'm messing with you. Right now we're focused on making the level generation work. From here we'll move on to implementing basic enemy behaviors, and after that rigs, inverse kinematics and animations. What do you think so far? Does this sound like a game you would play? I'm personally very hyped for this project, but we do have a long way to go. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. We also have a Discord server where everyone is welcome. If you want to join us there and discuss the development, look for the Kitchen channel. I'm now descending back to my developer den.